How can the Cowboys make their offense more explosive now that Dak Prescott is back? All that and more in this episode of the Locked On Cowboys podcast.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Locked On
Cowboys.
Locked On Cowboys.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. Today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. I am Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. He is Landon McCool. Check him out on Twitter at McCoolBCB. Landon, how's it going today, sir?
It's good. It's question day. You know what's interesting is that yesterday I was kind of just going through the Cowboys site looking at interviews. It was weird to see they only had like a 25-second interview with Dak after the game, kind of, heavily implying that he would be back this week. It was weird to hear Dak's voice again. We hear from him every week for so long, and then to not hear from him for a while was interesting. So I'm excited he's back, and I'm excited to be answering questions.
Yeah, so we're assuming that Dak Prescott is going to be back.
Yes.
The Cowboys, I don't believe they've practiced yet today, but the expectation is that Dak will be back. And a lot of you have questions about just the offense in general, and I get it. The last time we saw Dak, Cowboys offense put up 3 points against Tampa Bay. They didn't play well. Before that, it was the playoff game against San Francisco where they didn't really play all that well. So I think some people are a little bit nervous. So let's get to your questions. The first one comes from @YoChewy24. He wants to know, at what point will the Cowboys start incorporating KaVontae Turpin into the offense? Quick screens, jet sweeps, short passes. He is so explosive with the ball. Why not give him more touches on offense?
I think they've tried. I mean, they have given him a couple of looks. There was definitely one deep pass that they were going to try to get to him that I think ended up going to CeeDee Lamb. And was it against the Rams? I can't remember.
Maybe,
but they've had a couple of different times where they've given him a jet sweep. They've run him out in routes. They tried to get the ball to him in short situations. I think that, what's they've run into a lot is they haven't had and they've actually addressed this, I think, at several points, is that they haven't had necessarily a ton of plays in some of these games.
Yeah.
And I think that they don't necessarily they have plans to get to that with Turpin, but it just they don't get enough offensive snaps to kind of get around to it. So I think that they will continue to kind of work him in a little bit more as the season goes on. You don't want to overdo it, especially early. You want to, save some of that, potential big play stuff, trickery stuff. Some of it in your back pocket for later in the season. I'm sure he'll be involved at that. I also think that they have, right now 3 receivers that they want to try to get the ball to consistently, and they like their tight ends as well. So I think, we're going to have a conversation about some of the talent and some of it needing to step up. But I think as far as volume of targets as in people that you would like to get the ball to, I think the Cowboys have a lot of bodies there, so it's kind of getting around to it that has been the issue with Turpin so far.
So, and I think part of it's been the backup quarterback. So I think it's really easy on Twitter to say, oh, you have a backup quarterback. Why not just give the ball to Turpin and make the life on him easier? The problem is, for example, if you're throwing a wide receiver screen and you're at a shotgun, right? You need your quarterback to be able to catch the ball, sometimes without the laces, and get it to the outside quickly with velocity so that receiver can start making plays up the field, right? That requires a lot of arm strength to be able to do that. I don't know if that's necessarily Cooper Rush's strength, right? If you're running the jet sweeps, right, that requires timing and lots of practice, right, to get down the snap and be able to turn and hand it off to the receiver so he's not slowing down. Like, that stuff takes a lot of work. And sometimes I think that's just it's almost too much for a backup quarterback to worry about. Instead, just give them some really easy throws and really easy routes to work with. I won't be surprised if Turpin gets more involved in the offense now that Dak is back.
And let's not remember, like, what's the downside of what Marcus just discussed, right? What's the downside if the ball doesn't get out quick enough to Turpin, or if he's running a slant and it's a slow roller to him? The downside is that Turpin's having to wait on the football to arrive to him, and the defenders are bearing down on him, and that's not a good situation. So,
exactly.
Yeah, I think that those are really good points. Timing's a really big thing. You want to go run routes and run, plays that are going to be safe for Turpin. You want to get the ball in his hands quickly, not have to have him, jump up in a contested catch or make plays with defenders around him. You want him to get the ball in space and then create more space. So sometimes that's tough if you don't have a quick and accurate quarterback to get the ball out to him.
That, and you want him making plays with air in the defense, right? And I think the last couple of weeks against the Eagles and against the Rams, they're just not afraid of getting beat down the field. Like as well as Cooper Rush has played, the safeties aren't worried about getting beat over the top, right? It's just not his game. But once that comes back and he hits a couple deep passes to Gallup and a couple deep passes to CeeDee Lamb, you'll see the linebackers start to give him a little bit more space. And that's when the underneath stuff to Turpin starts to have some success. So not saying it's going to happen this week, but I won't be surprised in the next 2 or 3 weeks if you don't start to see more of him in the offense.
Absolutely.
All right. Let's stay on the receivers because a couple other people want to know about Jalen Tolbert and James Washington. This from Ahmad. He wants to know who is more likely to have significant playing time this season, James Washington or Jalen Tolbert?
I mean, I think Tolbert, simply because I don't really know what the status is of James Washington at this point. I mean, I think there's talk about him coming back, and for Tolbert, it's about, just developing into a valuable enough as wide receiver or getting good enough at special teams that you can be rostered, right? I think it could be close, and that's a decent question because, Washington is a guy that once he gets healthy, they probably will put out there. But I mean, if you're giving me my druthers, I would much rather put Tolbert out there and have him learn on the job and surpass James Washington than hope that a veteran wide receiver who hasn't done a ton in his career as it is right now, coming back from a foot injury in the same season and just trying to produce at the same level as a rookie who's still trying to learn the ropes.
And remember, the reason why the Cowboys signed Washington was because they knew they were going to be without Gallup for the first handful of games in the season. They weren't sure about Jalen Tolbert, which we saw. Jalen Tolbert wasn't ready, and they were still waiting to see if Noah Brown could grow into a bigger role. Now that Gallup is back, Noah Brown is clearly your wide receiver 3. Obviously, you have CeeDee Lamb. I'm not sure what the appeal is. James Washington doesn't play special teams, so he's going to run into the same exact problem Jalen Tolbert has. I don't know. I would assume Jalen Tolbert's going to get more looks.
Yeah, I mean, the question here is asking us, and I understand because we asked your questions, but we're really barking up the wrong tree because neither of us even understand why Washington's still on the team, to be honest. Like, it just doesn't make any sense.
His value was for the first month of the season, and unfortunately, because he got hurt, he wasn't able to help there. Now his spot on the team, I mean, I don't know. It's a strange thing. All right, let's get to some more questions. But before we do that, we want to tell you about LinkedIn. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster, most importantly, for free. All you have to do is add your job in the purple hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That is linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. All right, Landon, let's get to some more questions. And we have a lot of really good ones. Let's stay with the offense. This one from @JBay31. is there one move that you would make to try to improve the Cowboys offense going forward? Again, I think people are really nervous that just because Dak is back doesn't mean this offense is going to be good again.
I mean, I don't really know like what they're specifically looking for. I guess
I got one.
Yeah, let's hear it.
I think I'd play Jason Peters at left tackle.
Oh, so we're talking about okay.
Well, it can be whatever.
Okay, cool.
Whatever.
Well, I thought we were talking about specifically trades.
No.
Yeah, let's hear the talk about that. Give me your pitch there.
Left guard has been a massive issue for them. Even when Connor McGovern's been healthy, he's pretty clearly the worst offensive lineman in the starting group. I think the plan, as we talked about yesterday on the podcast, for Tyron Smith to eventually come back and be the left tackle and to move Tyler Smith to left guard. I think it's easier to have Jason Peters play left tackle. If you need to help him a little bit, you can help him, and have an awesome left guard that can help you really run the ball now in the middle. I think that's I don't know if you're going to get better at left tackle. There's a chance you would. Jason Peters is still really good, but I think you could significantly upgrade at left guard and overall your entire offensive line if you kick Peters out to tackle, move Tyler Smith into guard.
Yeah, I mean, I think despite the criticism that we gave this coaching staff last year for kind of making these mid-season, changes in the offensive line, I think this is a different situation, right? Like where you've got Jason Peters, who's been playing left tackle for the majority of his life, or his football life, his NFL football life.
The majority of his life, basically.
Yeah, but frankly, the majority of his life at this point, he's played so long. And then Tyler Smith, is obviously not unfamiliar with left guard. He played basically left guard exclusively throughout the spring and through training camp. So I tend to think what you do is you see if you can get through these next two games, and then make the transition during the bye week. And I do think that, yes, I agree. I think putting Peters at left tackle, kicking Tyler Smith into guard, what it does is that it gets your best five out there in playing probably the best configuration of those five, right? And then on top of that, what it does is that it makes a very smooth and easy transition for when Tyron Smith comes back. He simply slides into left tackle. You make Jason Peters your swing guy. And frankly, I mean, if you wanted to, you can make, McGovern is probably a better choice at left guard to come in if you needed to. But if you needed to, you could just play Jason Peters as your swing left side guy if you had to.
Sure. Plus, I think it's great to have McGovern back as your sixth offensive lineman, right?
Fullback is what you mean. Yes, absolutely.
Well, we're kind of joking, but also kind of not. Like it's way harder in the middle of a game to move Connor McGovern from left guard to fullback rather than just bringing him off the bench and having him play fullback, right? Because now you're messing with two positions.
Yeah, and if you're asking me like what I would change, now that now that Dak's back to help this offense, I would love for one of these reporters to ask Dak, and I hope that they wouldn't do this in a way that's condescending or suggesting that he needed to learn something from Rush, but I would love to know what Dak learned these last 5 weeks while he was out. Like not necessarily about playing the quarterback position or something that Rush did that he would play better. What did he learn about his own team? What did he learn about this defense? What did he learn? And by learning about how talented this defense is, does that make his game? What's the word I'm looking for? Like demeanor different. Right,
where he basically doesn't feel like he has to put on a Superman cape every single drive down there, right?
Because that's when we've run into the issues, right? Is when it feels like Dak has to carry the whole team by himself, and that's when he starts pressing, and that has kind of mixed results, at times when he does that.
And to be fair, this isn't just a Dak Prescott issue. Like you look across the league, there's a lot of quarterbacks that have the same problem. Aaron Rodgers is having it right now. Like they're designing good plays and options underneath, and he wants to play hero ball on third down because that's what he's done his whole career. I mean, even Patrick Mahomes to a degree, right? His defense is really good. Sometimes he takes unnecessary chances. I think for Prescott, like he probably knows, hey, if it's 3rd and 11, I don't have to throw the riskiest throw. If we take 8 yards and punt, it's okay. It's not the end of the world with this defense.
Yeah, and I think also having a run-based offense isn't the worst thing for this offense. Like, especially with all the too high coverage that we're seeing, all the low points that are being scored across the league. Yeah. I think that teams are finding that having a solid and reliable run game is about as good as a remedy for facing all the too high coverage that they are facing as there is in the league. Eventually, when you run against a team successfully, they're going to have to drop down that second safety in there. And that's when you attack the cover 1, cover 3 portion of their defense. So I think all these things, hopefully, again, I don't want to frame it like Dak Prescott doesn't know how to play quarterback. That's not it at all. What it is understanding the state of his own team, understanding the state of what the strength is of this team, which is the defense, and internalizing that and realizing I don't need to, I've got a defense that can support me, and I think playing that will help the offense play better complementary football at times.
I think a good example of this last year was the first Washington game in Washington where the defense was completely dominant. And then Dak made a risky throw in the fourth quarter that led to a pick 6. And all of a sudden Washington got right back in that game. If he just runs the ball, throws it out of bounds, Washington wasn't moving the ball at all on defense. Just like it's okay with this defense, especially when you have a lead, to just let them kind of do their thing. There's going to be times where he's going to need to bail out the defense. I don't get the sense that it's going to be the next couple of games, but we shall see. All right, next question. This one from Goran. He wants to know, can we use Trysten Hill finally clicking in his 4th season as a lesson for patience regarding Neville Gallimore's slow start? I mean, I don't think it's been any debate. Trysten Hill has been better than Gallimore this year. Should we exercise patience on this one, or do you think there's something else going on here?
No, I mean, I think patience is shown. Like, look, all these guys were young when we drafted them, and they got better as time got on. And defensive tackle is one of those positions that, there is a certain tier of guys who come in as physical freaks and are able to play right away and have no issues. But there's a good portion of these folks that have to come in and play and learn how to play the position properly, especially as a pass rusher. So, yeah, I mean, I'm certainly not, some of this stuff that we talk about, even going back to Tolbert a little bit, some of this stuff is not a case of the player failing, right? It's a case of other players doing really, really well. I don't know that Gallimore has failed to develop. I think, you would hope that he was a little bit further along than he is, but I think the thing that's really accentuating this is that Trysten Hill's really played a lot better. I think with Tolbert, it's like Noah Brown. Everyone, talks about Tolbert, but then they don't talk about how the improvement of Noah Brown forced Tolbert off the roster. So I think that those are things that we need to consider when we're having these conversations. And yes, to kind of get to the larger question, I think patience is important with these defensive tackles, because especially for someone like Gallimore, who is coming from an OU defense that, we've already talked about at different points, is very different. He had to learn a whole bunch of new techniques. He had a lot to learn over this time period. And that can be difficult.
I'm just not quite as optimistic that Gallimore is going to develop the way Trysten Hill did for a couple of reasons. Number one, Gallimore is a full year older than Trysten Hill. Like, Hill was a really young prospect coming out who didn't play a lot of football. His growth got stunted a little bit because he played with 3 different defensive coordinators in his first 3 years.
Yep.
Right. Rod Marinelli, Mike Nolan, Dan Quinn. He tore his ACL, hit at 2020 season, right? Same game that Dak tore his.
Yep.
He just hasn't played a lot, where Gallimore, he's been in the system for a couple of years now. He's already, I think he turns 26 at the end of this season. I don't know.
I also think they've moved him around a little bit more than Hill has.
He has reshaped his body, so I don't know quite as much. But I guess I'm just more optimistic long term that what we're seeing from Trysten Hill is going to be what we're going to get from him, rather than Gallimore taking another step or two in the next year.
I also think that because he's changed his position, we need to change our standard for him, right? Like, he's playing a lot more one technique. He's playing a lot more nose. He's not doing very much 3 technique stuff. Certainly not at the rate that Trysten Hill or Osa or even, probably on par with what Golston is doing at times. So, I think that he's a different type of player than Tristan Hill is now. And I think he's moved into being more of their, nose guard that can pass rush a little bit more. And then even the nose guard stuff has kind of been superseded by how well Quinton Bohanna has played. And he's been harder guy to keep off the field.
So we've got a really good question about the defensive line in general. And I want to get to that. But before we do that, I want to tell you guys about BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for football betting info this season. Find all the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth articles and analysis on every game that you find. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all of your sports wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores for every single sport out there. It is the fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your favorite games and events, including NFL, NBA, MLB, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to betonline.net or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right. This is a really good question about the defensive line. It comes from @CowboysOptimist. So this isn't my burner.
Oh, yes.
I'd like a deeper dive into the team's defensive line rotation. Watching the game, it's hard to follow the subs coming in and out. Is there a structure to the rotation? Is it based on certain down and distance considerations?
It's package based from what I can tell. It's formation based. Like they have 3 or 4, well, no more than that, like 7 or 8 different packages and alignments that they use in those packages. And I think each one of those alignments has their own positions. And I think that they like to use specific players in each one of those positions. For instance, they have an alignment where it's kind of almost a tight formation where they've got 3 guys inside the tackles. One is a 4-eye, one is a kind of a nose, and then one is a true 3 technique. They'll use Tank Lawrence for that 4-eye. They'll use Golston. They'll use Armstrong.
What a nice play last week, by the way.
Yeah, he did actually. They'll use a tackle. They'll use some of those other guys inside they'll use Tristan Hill in that as a 4-eye sometimes. I think it's they have these variety of roles that are inside of individual packages that have specific techniques, meaning like 0 technique, 3 technique, 4 technique, specific techniques for that package. Mm-hmm. And then I think that they have players that they like to use for each one of those techniques, right? And they kind of will rotate those techniques in. It's a lot to keep track of, I imagine. But I think that that's part of what you see and why it seems kind of random at times is because it's not necessarily it's not like hockey, right? Where you've got your first line and your second line and you're just rotating them in. I think that there is an element of that. I'm sure they have like a 4-man front, base package, and then they have their 1s and their 2s. But on top of that, they're also rotating in different, formations, and then those are being subbed in based on, what they're trying to do with each one of those techniques and who best fits that position.
And a lot of it's just game plan based, right? Like there's certain games where Bohanna's just not going to be active because they don't need a big, plotty nose tackle. So, I think you're right. I'm curious to see what they do this week against Detroit because Detroit has a really good offensive line and they want to run the ball. Is this a game where we see like Tristan Hill, Bohanna, Osa, and Gallimore all play a bunch of snaps? I think it's possible.
It certainly is when you consider the fact that Jared Goff is not exactly going to be slinging the ball around the field too much, you would imagine.
Yeah. All right, last question. This is a really fun one. This one from David. He said, back in the day, quarterbacks used to have nicknames: Jim Machine Gun Kelly, Rocket Randall Cunningham, Joe Cool Montana. Why don't quarterbacks have nicknames anymore? And can you think of any good ones? So first of all, I did a lot of research on this today.
Oh boy.
We do have some quarterbacks that have nicknames right now, right? Danny Dimes. We had Johnny Football a couple years ago. Yeah. Can you think of any other quarterback nicknames out there right now? Because I have.
I mean, look, Mr. Unlimited is getting a lot of grief. And honestly, I think that's my answer, right? Like the problem is that the nicknames eventually, once the worm turns, those nicknames get used against you pretty heavily. Yes. So that's, I think, part of the issue. Let's hear a couple more of these names though.
Okay. Would you believe that on Pro Football Reference, Dak Prescott's nickname? Because if you go click on their names, you can see that like the
they have the nicknames in there. Yeah.
Have you ever heard anybody call Dak Prescott the Fortress?
No. No, wait, but that has to be a Cowboys nickname, right? Because that's not something from he wasn't number 4 in college.
It says the Fortress. That's
Is
what
it
it says.
FOU?
No, it's FORT.
Oh, it's spelled like it's supposed to be. Okay. I don't. The only way that name makes sense is that if you're incorporating the fact that he's number 4. I would say, right?
So Tom Brady has a bunch of them.
Yeah.
TB12, got it. Tom Terrific.
Yeah, I've heard that one. That's stupid.
Touchdown Tom.
That's another stupid one. Yeah.
The GOAT, which I get.
Okay.
The Pharaoh.
Never heard that one. Does he tell riddles or something? Why
there's one that just says Sir, just SIR, Sir.
No. No. Why are they coming up with this? Is the Pro Football Reference site apparently is like Wikipedia where anyone can kind of go in there and edit.
Jameis Winston, Jabbo.
I've heard that one. That one goes back to college, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We got a lot of these. So if you ever want to just like burn an hour, go to Pro Football Reference and just type in any random quarterback on there, and it's pretty good. It's pretty funny.
Yeah, and it's not just quarterbacks, because I definitely have been on there before and looking at a player's profile and seeing a nickname listed there that I was like, I've never heard that nickname for that player ever.
There's some wild ones on there too. But yeah, I think you're right. I think the nicknames now are almost derogatory towards a quarterback, right? Like if you don't want a nickname because it feels like then they're almost making fun of you, like Danny Dimes or Mr. Unlimited.
Shout out to Yuma Cactus yesterday, because when the whole thing went down about Russell Wilson and his hamstring situation, Yuma came into my mentions and goes, was on the injury report, was he listed as unlimited? And it was maybe the best thing I saw on Twitter yesterday.
I do think we need to get more nicknames back in the NFL. That's why we miss Chris Berman doing like a full primetime thing. That's how we used to get all these awesome nicknames. So
yeah, he was definitely the conduit for all nickname creation in the mid to late 90s for sure.
All right, that's it for today's show. Thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every day. Now make your second listen the Peacock and Williamson NFL show. Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson give you the expert NFL analysis in less than 30 minutes. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. We got a busy week for you guys. Tomorrow, we've got the crossover show with Matt Derry, it was already recorded that. That was a lot of fun. Make sure you check that out. Landon and I will be back on Friday to preview this week's 7 matchup with the Lions. Follow him on Twitter at Landon or at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosier. We'll see you next time.